The legacy of Ioco in Port Moody, the refinery and town site, would not have happened had it not been for a land dispute between Imperial Oil and Burnaby Municipality. Imperial Oil's plans to build a refinery alongside existing storage tanks, mooring dolphins, and offices in North Burnaby were abandoned in 1912. This decision set the stage for the building and opening of the Ioco refinery in 1914 on the north side of Burrard Inlet, across from the small community of Port Moody. By 1919, the refinery processed 2,000 barrels of crude oil a day. Most of the 240 employees who worked at the plant originally commuted from Port Moody by ferry or walked along the rail spur. Soon a shanty town of employees grew around the refinery site, and in 1921 Imperial Oil began building an adjacent town site, Ioco. Ioco Townsite today is designated a Heritage Conservation Area by the City of Port Moody. What exists today, in structure and character, is a remnant of the vibrant community that now seeks restoration and revitalization. What will it take to protect, preserve, rehabilitate, and ultimately revitalize the Ioco Townsite? First, a quick history of the townsite. As noted, it was started in 1921 by Imperial Oil, and in that year both the Ioco School as well as the Community Center were built. Those buildings were used actually up until the 1990s or in 2000, but today are abandoned and not in use on the townsite. 1922, the Ioco grocery store opened, now called the Groceteria, and of course it was used until the mid-1990s as well. The Ioco United Church, built in 1924, is still in use today. It was originally a Presbyterian church, but recently, under the United Church banner, has been amalgamated with St. Andrew's United and is now part of Inlet United Church. By the late 1920s then, Ioco developed into a thriving community consisting of homes, churches, a grocery store, a community hall, a lawn bowling green, and other recreational facilities including a baseball diamond, tennis courts, and a horseshoe pitch. Here are two maps that basically show the town site in its heyday in 1939, and basically what was left as structures in 1999, 3 years before the Heritage Conservation Bylaw was approved. You can see that it was pretty well built out with all of its structures and homes in 1939, and gradually lost many of those, if not majority, through either relocation of the buildings to possibly homesteads in Anmore, one of course which is now the actual caretake cottage at Old Orchard Park, and of course a number have been lost due to fire. Unfortunately, since 1999 we've lost another building due to fire, which was probably one of the largest houses that actually had remained on the site at this point in time. The Tremaine residence, noted here, was a building identified by Gillick, one of the property owners in about 2015, as a possible building to restore and use it as a center for its plans for redevelopment. Unfortunately, that project has been suspended. There are two other buildings on the site today that have been considered previously to be beyond rehabilitation, but most recently they have in fact been mothballed to a state where possibly they could be restored, but again they're in a very delicate state of dilapidation. The site does, though, continue to have some issues. There is some continual theft of security fencing. Some of that's being now resolved with the installation of chain link fencing around the buildings. There is illegal dumping that continues to happen on site, and on occasion one or two of the houses may be broken into as a homeless location for either individuals or more than that, and that is something that is an ongoing concern, considering most of the site is basically secluded from general public access. So what exists today as the Heritage Conservation Area? We have 3 occupied buildings, the Ioco United Church mentioned previously, and 2 private residences that are still occupied on the Imperial Oil lands. We have a number of unoccupied buildings, the Community Hall and the Groceteria mentioned earlier, the school plus its gymnasium, as well as 11 houses distributed across the 2 major landowners, Imperial Oil and Gillick. There's a park area that's part of the town site. It's the former bowling green and sports field, And there's also the roadways, laneways, kind of the developed plan that would have been for the community as it sat with its required civic utilities. So some key dates and events relative to the heritage conservation. It was in September 2002 that the actual heritage conservation bylaw was adopted by the City of Port Moody. In October of that same year, the first Ioco Ghost Town Day was held, and that's been a continuing annual event to celebrate the history of the Ioco village. In September 2003, the Ioco Heritage Lawn Bowling Association was formed. There's been multiple attempts by that organization to rebuild the lawn bowling green, but up until this time, all of those particular ventures have failed. In February 2009, Imperial Oil, which owned the majority of the land at the time, did put together a conceptual plan for the town site, but that plan was very quickly abandoned and no further work was done on it. Most significantly, in 2015, there was a major sale of part of the town site to Brilliant Circle Group Investments, now called Gillick, who purchased the eastern portion of the town site from Imperial Oil. Since that time, a number of events have occurred. In September of 2015, the City of Port Moody actually put in place a very specific plan for preservation and preventive maintenance for heritage conservation. This plan was then used by Gillick to basically take on some of the required preventive maintenance needed to mothball the buildings. September of that year was when Gillick revealed their plan to restore the Tremaine residence mentioned earlier, but of course that is being currently suspended. Between 2015 and 2019, Gillick has actually been responsible for the preservation and maintenance of all of the remaining buildings on site, excluding the school and the church, but including those buildings that are actually on the Imperial Oil land. And there has been no agreement being able to be put in place to revitalize the lawn bowling green. In November and December of 2019, Imperial Oil did undertake some additional remediation work on their side of the town site, particularly for environmental purposes, to ensure that there was no remaining oil or other contaminants that might be in those properties. And most recently, in the spring and summer of this year, there has been an updated building assessment done on the majority of the buildings, with the exception of the school. These were external investigations, but they do note that there is continued and concerning integrity issues with the building, and because of no interior investigation, it's unclear as to what the actual stability is of the remaining buildings on site. There has been minimal preservation and preventive maintenance work undertaken by Gillick on the buildings, but that basically ensures that there is a mothballing of the buildings. There is no restoration happening. It's minimal work just to try to minimize the level of deterioration due to general weathering and exposure. So what are the city's goals with respect to the heritage conservation area? Well, the city's OCP includes a very specific section related to this area, and it was developed at the time when the Heritage Conservation Bylaw was put together, and even in its most recent update of its OCP, the appendix that describes the Heritage Conservation Area Guidelines has had relatively minimal changes since its original creation. So the city has had a long-term vision with respect to its desires for the Ioco HCA. In addition, the city's current Heritage Strategic Plan, recently updated in 2016, does identify some more specific statements of what should be done to work in cooperation with the property owners to actually restore and enhance the integrity of the town site, and very specifically to work with the three major property owners, Imperial Oil, Brilliant Circle, and the school board, for how the actual town site could be restored and revitalized into a living community. The map you see here basically shows the envisioned plan in 2002 when the bylaw was put together, and it shows what could possibly be undertaken as a revitalization plan for the community. Not necessarily this would be the end result, but it was a vision at the time as to what could be looked at as a way to revitalize the town site. The heritage conservation and the plans for the site do require a call of action. Since 2002, there's been minimal work that really has been undertaken that really work towards the vision. This involves both the city as well as the landowners. And the current inaction by all parties continues the risk of loss of some of the physical elements of the heritage conservation area. What must be noted, though, is heritage is not just physical, it's environmental and cultural. And the cultural community that basically existed in Ioco could be recreated as a vibrant community setting for families and just the community intent of the lifestyle that was existent in a small neighborhood within an existing larger city. The city actually has the most to lose in this regard, but also has the most to gain. The city needs to be a facilitator and not just a custodian of land, as it does need to work with the existing property owners to in fact bring the vision to life. The city established the Ioco Heritage Conservation Area Vision in 2002. What actions will the city take to preserve, rehabilitate, and ultimately revitalize the Ioco HCA to achieve the vision? This presentation was given and presented to the Port Moody City Council in January of 2020. It was presented by the Port Moody Heritage Society as a message to them with respect to the status of the town site and expectations they have from a standpoint of the city being able to move forward with achieving the vision that they established in 2002. We hope that this gives you some background as to the community, the character, the life, and what the possibility is by going through a revitalization of the heritage area called Ioco. Thank you.